All right, let's call it to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
You have been muted. To unmute yourself, press the star key twice. Mute off.
Did we lose them? Okay. Are you guys both still there?
I am.
Okay. Where is it? Okay. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you all for coming to the, mine's different. Oh, wait. To the Board of Commissioners meeting. I went to the hearing. That's what I did. Okay. I want to remind everybody that this is a public meeting. And can everybody hear me okay with this mask on? Okay. This is a public meeting, and when you speak, please come to the podium and identify yourselves. And this is being recorded, both video and audio. Any awards, recognitions, or correspondence?
Yes.
We do? Oh, I buried it. Ah. Okay. The first one is from the Sheriff's Office. This was left on one of our patrol deputies' patrol cars. It's a letter that's placed on my patrol car at my residence recently, and I wanted to share it with you. It says, during these very trying times, when the ethics of law enforcement is coming into question, it is nice to know there are a lot of people in our county that support our efforts. I would just ask all of you to keep that in mind while you perform your daily duties. We are a very dedicated professional organization, and we live by our oath of office, mission statement, and positive character traits. No one can take that away from us. Is that the letter that was attacked? No, that was...
One more.
Okay. And this is the actual letter. With these troubling times, I've got a glare on my shield. With these troubling times, with everyone bashing the law enforcement personnel, I want to share my appreciation for the work that you all do. I know you risk your lives for us to keep us safe, and you don't get paid nearly enough to do it. I am sorry for the disrespect that you are all receiving right now. Thank you again, your neighbor. So that was under one of our patrol deputies' cards. And this is addressed to the sheriff from Good Shepherd Hospital from CEO Dennis Burke. Dear Sheriff Rowan, Good Shepherd Healthcare System wants to express our sincerest appreciation and affirmation for the services you provide our communities and for the strong partnership we enjoy with our local police, sheriffs, troopers, and first responders. We are living through some turbulent times, including the challenge of a pandemic and different perspectives on the structure and organizational of law enforcement. In the midst of the chaos, we want to be very clear in thanking you for being there for us. We could not do what we do as a healthcare organization without the backup and partnership we have. We want you to know that we support you and have your back as you have ours. Thank you. Dennis Burke. Okay. Acknowledgement of the minutes of the previous meeting. Okay. And any public input and recognition of visitors that are not on the agenda? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Number one, proposed North County Livestock District public hearing. So we'll go into hearing mode at this time.
You can ask for public input.
I'm sorry? Was that one of the commissioners?
I believe someone on the phone.
Okay.
We have to listen.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call to order the hearing. And again, I want to remind everybody that this is a public hearing. So please, when you come to the microphone, identify yourselves to the to the board. And I just want to remind everybody that due to social distancing, my colleagues are not up here with me as normally. That's why they're on the phone. They're just in their office at the time. So new business. Text amendment T20-082.
That's for a later public hearing.
Am I at the wrong one? Which one?
That's the one.
I knew that was testing you. Ah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so proposed North County Livestock District public hearing. Number A, the petition. Do we have the petition?
Yes, you do.
Is that this binder?
That's the binder. And then it's also the one that's on the screen at the present time.
Okay, that's exactly what I'm looking at.
Did they ask for a public?
Not yet, no comments at this time. So we, the undersigned, petition the Board County Commissioners of Umatilla County to initiate proceedings to form a special district and livestock district to be known as North County Livestock District. This petition is filed pursuant to ORS 198.705 to 198.955 and ORS 067.008 to 607.055.
I got there.
Okay, so the names of the affected districts, I'm not showing anything there. Okay, so there's no affected districts. Names of affected counties, Umatilla County. The territory of the subject of this petition, inhabited or uninhabited, this will be inhabited. The following livestock or class of livestock will not be permitted to run at large within the proposed livestock district. Bovine species, horses, mules, asses, sheep, goats, and swine. The proposed boundary of the district will be, and there should be a map. Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. Okay.
Yeah.
The names and addresses of principal petitioners, Jeff Knutson, 82106 South Juniper Canyon Road, Helix, Oregon. And it is signed by Mr. Knutson. And notice to property owners.
Would you like me to go through those documents?
That would be phenomenal. Did you want this one, or do you have
Hopefully I memorized, I don't know. Doug Olson, Umatilla County Council. This matter is before the Board of Commissioners based on that petition. It was initiated by Jeff Knutson to form a new livestock district in Umatilla County. It is generally described as a North County livestock district, and it encompasses area from the county line north to approximately the outskirts of the city of Pendleton, and east from the city of Helix to approximately on the west boundary at the mouth of the Juniper Canyon. There are a number of people that have signed the petition along with Mr. Knutson. Those are attached as part of the petition. And along with the petition was the map and the showing the map of the current livestock districts in Umatilla County. As required by the statute, once the petition was received, it was scheduled for this public hearing. The process for forming a livestock district in Oregon has changed a little bit since the Board of Commissioners has last dealt with the livestock district. There is no longer an election required for the formation. It is just up to the Board of Commissioners following a public hearing. And public notice for this hearing was sent to all of the property owners within the proposed livestock district with a 500-foot buffer zone, which would amount to about 512 property owner notices that were sent out, notifying them of the hearing today for this. In response to that petition and notice, there have been a number of people that have called in and filed some documents with the board. Those are part of the record and are shown in support or in opposition. Along with Mr. Knutson, I believe there's another Maitland email that was sent there. And then the Jones, Brian and Kathy Jones, also filed a statement requesting additional property to be in the livestock district. And then in opposition, there are a number of letters and emails. The first one is from Mr. McCormick, and he is opposing it because his property would be split by the livestock district, a portion in and a portion out, and he would just prefer that the livestock district end at about 3 miles north of his property line. Also in opposition was a petition filed by Mr. Simpson along with some other people that own property within the proposed district, and that is also part of the record. Ms. Livingston has filed a written testimony letter, and she is present today, and she can also testify to that. The process for the board is to have those opposed and those in support of the petition available for testimony. There really aren't any statutory requirements that have not already been met by the petition. It meets the statutory requirement for the 2,000 acre minimum, and all of the other statutory requirements have been met. So at this time, the board can go ahead and listen to the testimony of those, starting off with the petitioner and those in support.
Okay. Any questions from the other two commissioners?
No.
Okay. Okay, at this time, why don't we go ahead and hear from those who are in...
Excuse me, I was on mute.
Oh.
A question for Doug. Doug, are the petitioners on the sheets of the petitions considered to be supporters?
Yes. And they're petitioners and in support of it, with some minor exceptions. Well, not minor. After they signed the petition, the Brocker family and their various corporations decided that they would no longer support the district and now are in opposition. And there are two emails documenting that are in the record.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to hear from the members of the audience who are in favor of the petition. Jeff.
I'm in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioners. I would just wanted to go over some of the things I laid out in my letter to the commissioners.
Real quick, Jeff, let me interrupt you. Can you say your name and your address for the record, please?
I apologize. Name is Jeff Knutson, 82106 South Juniper Canyon Road from Helix. As I was saying about going over this letter that I sent into the commissioners, just want to go over a couple other things and maybe a little bit more detail on some of the items I listed. One of the main reasons that we're forming this district is on my question number one. And the one thing I've seen over several seasons, and one thing I did see this season, what happens when cattle come onto your property and while you're spraying wheat, or federal labels, on chemical labels, we have graze back periods. Chemicals we were spraying this year had a 1 week graze back period. Now, we're good neighbors with our neighbors. We call them, they come get the cattle out. But whose liability if something happens to those cattle, if they get sick? That kind of raised a big question in my mind. What happens? I didn't I did not build a fence. We tore out fences back. My dad tore out fences. I tore out fences. My kids have torn out fences. We've been doing it for years. And so I asked that question. I just put a hypothetical question to ODA. I said, you know, in this so-called scenario, what would happen, hypothetically? And talking with Mike Odenthal, he's the lead pesticide investigator with the Oregon Department of Agricultural Pesticides Program. He says it pretty clearly says that the wheat owner would be obligated to exclude the animals from the field, not the cattle owner. Well, I guess I've got some issues with that liability being put on me. I mean, obviously the cattleman wants to keep his cattle in, but things happen, and if his cattle get sick, it's on me because I did not build the fence. So that's probably the biggest reason why I had started this petition to form a livestock district. I don't want that liability. Another questions that I've been asked, and I've done more research since submitting this letter, what happens if cattle get out and they're hit on a road or they cause damage? How does the cattleman have any liability insurance on that? Well, the basic answer is you buy a liability policy. I've got liability policies. I've got umbrellas on my farm. Same thing, if I'm driving down the road with a piece of equipment and somebody strikes my vehicle or strikes my implement, I've got policy that will cover that as an umbrella. Well, then the other question that's been raised is, and a good question, you know, what if you got a homeowner out there, small acreage, has a couple horses, maybe a couple cows, and they get hit? Is that covered? Well, maybe yes, maybe not. It depends on your homeowner's policy and whether your carrier will provide insurance coverage for that. Some carriers will not cover that coverage, and that's something that people need to check out. Some insurance carriers are not comfortable carrying that type of coverage. Some are, and will cover it. But it depends on your insurance company and your carriers, which is something that can be covered. It may have to be an additional policy. You know, some people have additional policies on a four-wheeler they've got, or you know, a dog. If a dog comes, bites the neighbor that's walking by, if your policy doesn't have something in there to cover you, you may not be covered. But a lot of policies do cover that. It's just something that needs to be investigated. Why is the North Country Livestock District so big? Well, originally it wasn't going to be. You know, we were just addressing some issues with my neighbor, with my cousins who also wanted to form a livestock district, and it was going to be pretty small to begin with. But then, as other people started hearing what we were doing, they wanted to be included, and so it grew and grew and grew, and is the size that we've got on the petition right now. The main thing is just I guess our main goal is just shifting that liability issue from the wheat farmer, who has really nothing to do with cattle, and putting it back on the cattleman on his commodity. Now, are there some things that we need to explore? You know, speaking with Mike Thorne this week, yeah, you know, I would definitely be in agreement to explore some more ideas and thoughts as we move through this process, and I think that would be a good idea, something for the commissioners, I think, to consider, maybe, you know, exploring this for another, at least for another month, to get some more information. Anyway, that's
Can I interrupt you for a second?
my 2 cents. And
What kind of information were you guys talking about that we should consider as a board?
well, just speaking with Mike, you know, we talked about putting it, you know, just continuing the open forum process for another month. And speaking with some of the other people here in the room, they really don't have any problem with that either. Now, if that's not agreeable by the commissioners, you know, that's kind of up to your decision. But I think getting more information, like Mike would like to do, I think is a great idea.
Well, I think Commissioner Murdoch might even have some thoughts about continuing that. Commissioner Murdoch, did you want to say anything there?
Yeah, I've got several concerns actually regarding the fact that that at the outset, this appeared to be kind of an innocuous conversation, but clearly there's been a lot of emerging conversation that's come in the last week. I understand some of the notices didn't get to people in time to really react. We have people wanting in, we have people wanting out. There's questions of the territory, and I think this is a big enough matter, and I think it's also a matter that could be extremely divisive to the community in the North County, and I have some deep concerns about us making a decision today. I don't know if a month is long enough to do this. I think we could find out as part of the hearing if there is any presence of livestock at the moment, and when there might be a presence of livestock. So yeah, I have some concerns about trying to make a decision today.
Okay. Is there livestock there now, like the commissioner was talking about?
In some cases in the district, yes, there are livestock in the district. Typically, what we've seen, typically cattlemen will bring cattle in during the winter months through April, May, until the cattle can be moved out to the mountain pastures in May.
And that was the nature of my question. Obviously, good many of the people know that we have cattle of our own, and right now there are virtually none at home or on our place, and that's why I was curious in finding out if there are any large groups of animals even there at the moment.
And that is, I'm speaking for one neighbor. Another neighbor does have cattle there year round. So it's a mixed bag, I guess you could say. But
well, I don't see any issue with continuing the hearing to a later date. Commissioner Murdoch, did you have a time frame in mind?
Well, clearly it's awkward due to the regulations that are imposed upon us for meeting sizes. I'm just concerned it's a issue of significant magnitude that I'm really uncomfortable with the exclusionary nature of the hearing. So I don't know if I know how soon we need to have it. I think you could get some testimony relative to how from others in the room on how far you could put it out, but it just doesn't seem to me, because I am sick and tired of Zoom meetings anyway, or limited meetings, and I just would hope that at some point in time we could have a larger opportunity to visit. So I want you to find out, from the petitioners what their thoughts are about a timeline.
well, I guess my thought process is that I'd like to have something in place sooner the better. Obviously, I think anybody that wanted to call into the hearing can do that. I believe, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
So
you can hear people on the phone.
Anybody that had that phone or had that letter sent to them has that phone number, and they can obviously open up and talk about their issues today. As far as getting a public forum where everybody's gathered, God only knows when that's going to happen again. I hear people saying 6 months. I hear people saying a year. So I would not be in favor of waiting a year, or I believe having some more open forum for a month, I think, would be more than enough. But that's me speaking.
That goes a long ways to me, because you're one of the petitioners on this, so that carries a lot of weight with me. Did you have anything else, Jeff, to add to that?
Well, I guess on that process, what is typically seen, I'm new to this process, and I think a month is fair, but maybe that's...
Well, we're all new to this process now. That's a whole new set of rules. Doug, is there...
There's nothing to say. Usually when the board...
Yeah, so they get close to...
It's usually about a month.
So,
okay.
Unless there's some reason for additional time.
And I don't know if my colleagues heard Doug Olson say typically about a month is what the board will typically do. So, okay.
If I were tossing something into the hat, I'd say the September 2nd meeting, but Doug can react to that.
I didn't quite hear. There's a lot of background noise on the phone. Could you repeat that, George?
My thought was September 2nd board meeting, but Doug can react to that.
Okay. September 2nd, would that work for you?
I think that would be fine, yes.
Okay. I do want to hear from the other side as well.
Of course.
I don't want to rush you off, Jeffy, if you have more to say.
No, that's all I had to say. I'd want to
Okay.
be, as brief as I can.
Obviously, it looks like we're going to go down the road of continuing this meeting. Mr. Thorne, would you come to the, is that September 2nd meeting, is that kind of where you're at on that?
Yes, for the record, my name is Mike Thorne. I reside in the proposed district north of Pendleton. I'm not a proponent, so if you wanted to complete the discussion about from the proponent's perspective, I was going to offer some observations and possibly allude to maybe some alternatives that if the commission felt it needed to go forward with the district could in fact focus the solution where the problem is. Right now, what you've established or what a district establishes, as was testified to in the first comments, you create a whole broad new area of shift in liability. And while and I've asked my insurance agent for an example for clarifications on some of the questions, you can't get clear answers, number one. Number two, you can't insure offense, so there's a whole series of relationships that need to be established before you move forward with the district, from my perspective, if in fact you feel compelled that you need to do that. My attorney finally is not around, so I can't even help flush out some of the potentials that I was thinking about. So clearly we need more time, but it's a decision the commission will make on behalf of all sides of the question. So I've made more comments than I intend to. If you want to complete your hearing and hear from the other proponents, I'd be happy to step aside.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other proponents that are in the room that want to talk about the petition?
Okay, if I pull this down,
Yeah.
it's a little hard to talk sometimes. Hi, my name is Chris Holdman, President Holdman Ranches, Inc. We live at 81641 Highway 37, Pendleton, Oregon. The reason I'm here today is similar to Jeff. We had the same issue as far and concern when we were spraying our crop this spring as to the liability if cattle got on our property, who was liable if the cattle became sick or died. So, kind of the same answers we got that Jeff got. It was a little unclear, but, the feeling we got was that the farmer would hold a lot of the responsibility, and he needed to push those cows off his property after it was sprayed and keep them off of there for that period where there was supposed to be no grazing on that crop after it was sprayed. And so that was one of our big issues. Another big issue of ours is before we spray, we've had a substantial number of cattle that were in the wheat. This started about 3 years ago, and so we're summer fallow farmers, so we've had 2 crops and then a fallow in between. And so I'm kind of a numbers cruncher. My best guess estimate over 2 crop years over the last 3 years is that we've sustained damages probably in the $40,000 to $50,000 range of lost revenue because of damaged wheat that was caused by the cattle that were on our wheat. This year, we were pushing cattle out of our crop probably from March through early May, when the cattle from our neighbors' property were finally pulled out and transferred to a different location shortly about a week or so after we'd sprayed. Our crop this year was seeded quite a bit later, and so it was a later stand. It didn't really create a lot of growth until about the March time frame. 2 years ago, it was one of my earlier seeded fields, the area where we were having our issues. We had a pretty good stand of wheat going into winter, so there was quite a bit of growth, clear back into December. And so when the cattle got in there and came down for the winter months and came out of their mountain pasture, they actually started grazing on our wheat as early as December, 3 years ago. And so we actually had cows grazing our wheat from December through early May, so almost 5 months. And so the field that we have our main issue with, it's a 475 acre field. I went out and took a pretty close look after the cows had left at the size of the area that had been grazed down, probably about 2 inches tall, just down to a stem. And I would say to that 475 acre field, it was about 200 acres worth of damage. And this year being a pretty bad drought year, we just figured unless we got late rains, that crop being grazed on so late would never come back. It was just going to be a stem, no longer produce a head. So I guess from our point, we're looking at the financial aspects along with the liability issues that everybody else is concerning about. Like I said, for us, it's not only lost revenue, but we have the money we've invested into fertilizer, field prep, seed that was gone on those bushels. So that was in addition to the lost revenue. And then from people that know, especially our area, the problems with Russian thistle and the weed spectrum, the best control of those weeds along with chemicals is a good crop canopy. And so when that weed is eaten down, there is no canopy, so those weeds just basically explode. So we have an additional chemical expense. We have to come in and treat those acres to keep the Russian thistle especially under control. So you add that on top of the lost fertilizer, lost seed, and the lost revenue. And then this field next to us also has a tremendous rye infestation on the CRP that's next to us, and that's where the cows are grazing right now. And so what you learn as a farmer, when those cows come over and eat your wheat, they're not only eating your wheat, but they're also transporting those rye seeds either in their hide, or when they eat it, when they go to the bathroom, it deposits into our field as well. And so we've got a big, serious rye infestation in that crop that we had never had before. And so this week, my employees and I spent about a week and a half pulling all the rye on our crop of 2,700 acres. And it took us a week and a half to pull 2,200 acres. And then it took us a week of rye pulling in that one field of the 475 where the cattle are next to, and we still weren't able to get all the rye out of the field. And we spent a full week just on that one field. I've used outside rye pulling crew, Atkinson staffing out of Hermiston in the past, and I figured for us to bring in that crew of probably 10 workers for 3 days, it would cost us probably in the area of $10,000 to $12,000 just to have a rye crew come in for 3 days to pull the remaining rye that we left, because it was just too much for our personal crew. So I chose not to do that this year. And so we're going to be dealing with that issue because of the rye that's still in the wheat. We're going to save it till the very end, cut it last, so we don't get it in our combines and deposit over the rest of the ranch. But that's my direction this year, is to, harvest the areas where we did pull the rye, and then leave everything that's got the rye in it, harvest everything else, and then come back and finish up there, because we'll clean our combines out over the winter. So like I said, when you add up lost revenue, extra expenses for chemicals, rye control, it starts to, amount up to a sizable amount of money that it's costing us to be located next to an area where these cows are coming across the fence. And our family had and ran cattle for a number of years. And so when I got out of college and started farming, I was very accustomed to repairing fences, building fences, and we always had 4 and 5 barbed wire fences around all of our property where we had our cattle. And we would keep there in the spring and fall, and then move them up to our mountain pasture up by Ukiah. So we had lots of fence building to do up there as well. So personally, I had a lot of experience building and mending fences. The current fence that we have next to us, where we're having our issue, it's a single wire electric fence, and I'm not so sure if it's hot all the time. I grabbed it one day and it didn't even shock me, it wasn't even on. Other days, I'd see the cows out in the wheat, and I'd look at areas, and the fence was laying flat on the ground. The clips that held the posts had either broken loose or just fallen down, and the wire was laying on the ground. We also notice that with, a single wire fence, if you get the wire set too high, when they start having calves, the calves go underneath the wire, don't even know it's there. And being a cattleman and being around cows and calves, you know that when the cows and the calves get separated, that cow's going to do anything to get with their calf. And so when the calves are out in our wheat eating, that cow is going to go through, under, or over a fence to get where that calf is. I mean, that's just the way cows are. So that's one thing I learned in being in the cattle business for the number of years that we were with them. So I think a big part of it, the open range policy, I think is, being open range, it's just kind of a disincentive for the cattlemen to be a good steward of their animals. As farmers, we're stewards of our land. We do everything that we can to produce the best crops because, that's our livelihood. And I would feel the same way with cattlemen. The cattle are their assets, and, they want to protect them. They want to keep them safe because when they take them to market, that's their income. So I guess to me that's an issue, is when they know when they come into an area that it's open range, it's basically a disincentive right up front telling them that you don't need to worry about it, you have no liability. If the animal gets in your neighbor's wheat and does damage, don't worry about it. There's no liability issue there. It's all on him. If your animal gets on the highway, somebody hits it, bad accident, possibly dies or ends up in the hospital, don't worry about it. It's all on them, and in fact, they'll probably have to write you a check for the cow they hit. And so that's a big issue to us, as well as the cows getting on the highway. We live on Highway 37, which is a state highway, and I've been living there for 35 years, and we get, a lot of traffic. It's amazing on that highway. There's grain trucks, fuel trucks, chip trucks coming by multiple times a day. We also have a lot of automotive traffic. We have the car clubs, the old antique cars come by, the sports cars come by, and then just general traffic coming by there a lot, especially during the warm months, the spring, the summer, and the fall. And so there's a lot of traffic on that highway. And, being a state highway, and I've been there for 35 years, I've never seen a sign on that highway that says, caution, open range, drive or proceed at your own risk. And basically with open range, that's what it is. Because if you hit a cow or a horse or anybody else's animal like that, basically with open range, they have no liability, and so it's all on the driver. You may end up in the hospital or dead, and then you got to turn around and write a check to the guy that owned the cow to pay him for the cow that you hit. Plus your car may be totaled. So in my mind, that's a big issue too. The guy that works for me was coming home last fall, and excuse me, just a little nervous. And there was a state policeman down there on the highway, down around the area where we've been having the issue, and there were numerous cows out on the highway. And he had his lights on, it was dark, and he was out with a flashlight chasing cows off the highway back into this area where the cows were supposed to be. So there was, a tremendous liability issue there, especially at night. Come around the corner and there's a black cow and you can't see it. So, there's definitely an issue there. It's not just our crops that are being substantially damaged, but, as a person that lives there and drives down up in the road and has family members driving up and down the road, we have that risk driving on a highway, especially when it's not posted and nobody knows that it's even open range. And so if there's that risk to the drivers, at the least they should know about it. I've talked to people that hunt in the mountains, and they said, yeah, there are signs on some roads that say open range. So when they're up hunting, they know that those are areas that are open range. But our state highway, with all that traffic, and nobody knows. You just roll on the dice when you drive down the highway. So that's an issue. So like I said, those are my major concerns. We've had, something I'd add, 2 really bad motorcycle accidents in the last 3 years. One of them had to be life flighted to a hospital, and the other one showed up on my doorstep. And so I went ahead and called the ambulance, and I went ahead and did first aid until the ambulance showed up. It looked like he'd been mauled by a mountain lion from the motorcycle accident. Well, he hit a deer. Both those guys hit deer. And so deer probably weighed about 300 pounds. If you think if you're going to hit a cow on the road, probably in excess of 1,000 pounds, I mean, it's going to be a lot worse damage, probably death on a motorcycle. Like I said, in addition to all the other traffic we get, we have a tremendous amount of motorcycle traffic on this highway. I don't know if it's because they like all the corners and it's a fun road to drive or what the situation is. But
The answer is yes to that part.
yeah, like I said, we have some guys that come by on Sunday mornings at race, 4 or 5 guys that come by, they're just screaming by our house in full racing gear and screaming down the canyon and down to the Columbia River, turn around, come back. And, you know, if they hit an animal like that, it's going to be sure death. We just also get just a lot of motorcycle enthusiasts that like coming out that direction, making a loop, I guess. And like I said, just an amazing amount of motorcycle traffic we have on that highway in the summer months when it's warm. So I guess in closing, those are my major concerns. For us, it's been a big, say loss of income, increased revenue or increased expenses on the rye control, the chemicals we have to put down in order to control the weeds that have come up because of the loss of the canopy of the wheat. And like I said, the issue, once again, like Jeff said, who's liable if you spray your crops and you can't keep the animals out of there, and that situation as well.
All right.
So it's multifaceted for our operation. And I know I've heard some stories from some people that maybe the Holdmans are lazy and they just don't like pushing cows off their property. Well, we were pushing cows off of our property this spring almost every day for 2.5 months. And after the first week, it gets a little frustrating. You do it for 2.5 months almost every day, it gets really frustrating. And so I think a lot of it comes down to not just having the animals in that area, but also the quality of the fence. And like I said, we had cattle and ran it for years, and we had 4 and 5 wire barbed wire fences around all of our property where we had the cows. And as I can remember, they stayed in the majority of the time, and when we started having issues there towards the end, we realized when they started putting in CRP, the cows got a taste for that, and even with our 4 and 5 wire barbed wire fences, it was getting harder and harder to keep them in. So we made a decision and sold off the cows and got out of the cattle business. And so that was the way we dealt with it.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony. So,
Thank you.
John, can we ask questions?
absolutely.
I'd like to ask Mr. Holman on the issue of rye. $40,000 worth of mitigation is quite a bit. I know I've pulled rye out of my small field when it was in wheat, but it always seemed to come back anyway, and we didn't have cattle through. So can you tell me for sure that it was primarily in the area where the cattle roamed, or was some of this wind-driven rye seed? Give me some clarification there.
On the $40,000, I'm talking about lost revenue on the wheat, actually wheat that was destroyed and never came back from the cows eating the wheat, grazing it down. On the rye issue, this year I was projecting an expense of 3 days of rye workers between $10,000 and $12,000. We've hired this company to come in and pull rye for us. 10-member crew usually runs us around $3,000 to $4,000 a day. So you multiply that by 3, you're looking, approximately around $10,000 to $12,000 for a 10-man crew for 3 days. The rye that is in this CRP, that's another big issue of mine too, is we have some rye some CRP that's been put in around us, and everything I understood about CRP is there's also some management that comes in play when you put in CRP. Well, what we've found, our farm is surrounded by a lot of CRP ground, and a lot of that CRP now, for some reason, has become a seed bank for rye. And so it's put a lot of extra expense into our budget, having to use, Clearfield type wheats or do whatever we can to keep that rye pushed out. You get the deer moving it in, you'll have some wind movement as well. But the CRP that's next to us, where these cows are now, where we have the big issue, if you were to go out and drive into it now, like I said, you would see some areas where it's probably, I don't know, guessing 70 to 80% cover rye. So this rye has become a tremendous issue in this property next to us. And like I said, the cattle transferring it back into our wheat ground has become a big issue. We've always, that field that we spent a week on this year, we've always been able to pull it with our own personal crew. And this year we spent a week with our crew, and then we just had to leave some because that last 150 acres was so bad. We were going to have to bring in that outside crew, but we chose not to because there wasn't enough wheat there to even warrant spending the extra expense. And so, the CRP in our mind has become a big issue because I don't know if the mismanagement or what, but there's become a tremendous amount of rye in that CRP ground out in our area. And it's just become a rye seed bank, and it just keeps filtering into our fields. And, our farm, we always pulled our rye. We had it contained. We could pull it with our own crew and usually be in and out of there in 2 or 3 weeks and have everything pulled. And now our wheels are spinning, we're going backwards. And it's getting to the point where we can't do that anymore. And the only thing that's changed is that CRP ground has become a seed bank for rye, and it's moving back into our fields from there. And so we have to spend all this extra time and expense to try to control it, but it's all coming from outside of our fields. So, like I said, it was the $10,000 to $12,000 amount that was going to cost for 3 days of rye pullers. And
what I was trying to get at was how much of it was caused by the cattle and how much was just natural, caused by wind and so on.
Some of it could have been caused by wind as well, I guess you could say. A lot of it depends on where you find the rye. When you start finding, if you have rye along that's solid rye for 50 to 100 feet along a borderline, and you'll say, yeah, I'll expect rye to maybe blow over, maybe out 100 yards into that edge. But when you start finding rye individual plants, not patches, but plants that are spread out completely throughout the whole field, and you may find a single rye plant and nothing else around it for, 30 yards. And so it's usually been our opinion, farming since 1882, that a lot of those single plants that you find out in your field have been carried by animals, because the chance of the wind blowing a seed plant out, quarter of a mile into a field, one single plant, probably not going to happen, probability-wise because of the wind. So most of your wind issues, I would say, are going to be happening right next to that borderline where the rye infestation is so heavy. You'll see that. But when you have scattered plants throughout a field, individual plants, I would stake a high probability that was caused by animals. Transfer, whether it's deer, cows, or whatever.
Thank you. Okay. Another proponent.
You have been muted. To unmute yourself, press the star key twice.
My name is Jim Williams, and I live at 43229 Holman Road, Helix, Oregon. When I first came into the Helix area in about 1980, well, it was before that, about 1980 was my first year as a owner or operator of a wheat farm. My wife and I own part of a company called King and Tipple, and another subsidiary of that was TK Cattle. So our family was well versed in cattle industry, and we had our own feed mill, produced our own ration for the cattle. We ran about 500 head at a time through a feedlot. We ran a couple hundred head of cattle, grazed the mountains, ran them the stubble in the winter time in the Helix area. And the interesting part of our area, just an observation over the 40 years I've been in the country, is cattle were present for quite some time. And then there was TK Cattle, there was TNT, there was a fairly large cattle operation way out north on the Stockman place where my brother is now. There's still cattle out there. There was cattle on the lower end by Holman's and Mike Thorne and those guys. But it seems like over time, agriculture in our area has kind of evolved to more dryland wheat farming. And when that happened, most of the fences really became a nuisance to the guy growing the grain. They collected, Russian thistles would blow in. Over time, they would collapse, erode. So most everybody in our area, and me included for many years, tearing fence down, getting rid of the fence. It was a nuisance to us. So for where we're at, there's not a lot of fence left. And basically why it was taken out, because it was a barrier to us. Well, now there's cattle on the lower end. I can see what Chris is facing. And another part of my business is we have 4 farming companies. Then I have another company, a corporation called North Country Growers, and it's a crop protection company. And I've been involved with Chris for 22 years with that company. So that's another aspect of what I do. But watching the environment around me change in 40 years, has become more wheat growing country than cattle country. That's why the fences have kind of disappeared a lot of my area. Now, I have no problem with cattle. I was involved in the cattle industry for many years. But when I was young, my father-in-law was a pretty tough guy, and he would explain to me how important it was to do a good job with the fence, because you have a hell of a responsibility on your kid. Is the fact that you have this thing called open range, and it's a great tool for you. If you have a cow get out and gets hit by someone, you have a lot less liability. But you should still be very conscious of your neighbors. You should be responsible. Build a fence so it doesn't affect your neighbor's livelihood, But that's how I was brought up in the farm industry. I was very fortunate to have a person teach me like Joe and Les King. They're very good farmers, very good cattlemen, and so I did learn it. I learned that respect. But when I developed North Country Growers in 1996 or 97, I've had a relationship with Chris and Holman Ranches since 98, I believe. And I've covered about every bit of this county, from Milton Freewater to the Columbia River, south to Pilot Rock, going up the hill before you drop into Hermiston. And I've had an excellent opportunity to see how this part of our agriculture has evolved. But if you wonder where it puts me as a commercial operator in the state of Oregon, you have to be real careful when you work for someone like Chris, because you got to be conscious of the cows. And my first initial thought was it wouldn't be my responsibility if there was cows out there grazing. And as it evolved, the second year I was involved, there was a 3-year period where the cows showed up. I was out spraying some stubble, and we let the stubble go till it got pretty big right before the cheatgrass headed, and that was the idea, to spray it out to give us a little bit more residue in the soil, so we'd have less operations through the summer on it. And the cows were out there, and I probably spent 3 hours pushing cows with a sprayer. Tried to call the owners, so I couldn't get them, so I called Tom Sorey, and one of their kids showed up on a side-by-side, started moving cows out. And that was great. Cows were off of it. But I still had that responsibility for 7 days. The cows came back and grazed it. Big question is, who's liable if you bust that graze back period? Well, it's pretty simple. As we've talked to ODA now, it's the operator or it's the farmer. Makes it real tough for a commercial operator to come into those areas and do work. Now, I am heavily insured. I have a high-risk company I deal with, insure with, Lloyd's of London, and it gets more expensive every year. And I'm not going to say it gets more expensive because of cows, but with the environment we work in, yes. But that's another issue we face, is If you want an operator to come in and help you, you want an operator to come in and sign off a work order and do recommendations, there's potential there that you could be tied with liability to that work order, that recommendation, as well as the application. There's a lot of gray matter there. And that's a concern to me as an operator. And then from that point, it made me very proactive to become a part of the cattle district, because I thought I would be proactive at that point, protecting myself for those type, of things that could occur. So that's where I'm at with it.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the two commissioners?
I have none.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other proponents of the petition?
You have been muted. To unmute yourself, press the star key twice. Mute off.
Hi, my name's Larry Williams. I live in Athena, Oregon, 525 East Main, farm manager for Barnett Rug. I've seen both sides of the open range and closed range. I had a bull hit in open range, and I couldn't stand the point where I paid for the car, and it was my bull, and I put the bull down. I mean, you got to have a conscience, being a cattleman, even a wheat farmer. I totally understand where Jeff's coming from. I agree with him. I agree with a lot of stuff that's been said. I think there's different ways we can do things. I've got guys that run cattle out north on me. I've had two different outfits. Both of them been really good. They've done everything they can to keep the cattle in. Jeff has got a pretty good relationship with Krabals and Nogles. I agree with Mike where we say I think we need some more time, and it's hard to decide how much time it's going to be. My opinion is, I live it, like I said, I live in it and I live out it. I think personally we should give the people that got the cattle out there enough time. I don't know what that time frame is, maybe a year, to maybe get a good fence built around it. And then if things don't work out, let's do this again and let's close it then. But I think everybody should have a chance to make things right with everybody else. Everybody wants good neighbors. Nobody wants to be bad neighbors. So, but I totally understand both sides of it. I think we should prolong this deal. Jeff thinks a month's okay. I don't know if it is or not, but I think we ought to give the people time to take care of the problem and give them the opportunity to do it. And then if they don't do it, then let's close it. That'd be my opinion.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other proponents in the room? Okay. Seeing none, how about any, go ahead, Mr. Thorne.
I'm Mike Thorne. I was here before addresses. Actually, now I live in Pendleton, 103 Northwest Johns. I have property out on Holman Route, and I identified myself previously. The point that I think needs to be, and I would admonish the commissioners through the council, there's been a lot of comments made regarding the liability question. I have an email from my insurance company, and I asked them a series of questions. For an example, a traditional homeowner's policy, which most people think covers them, will not cover you if, say, your horse gets out and you have a small acreage. So there's the unintended consequence of what happens as a result of the liability questions that have been suggested in the comments from the proponents. Not to criticize the fact that it's a present potential liability, but whether or not it exists is a question that we need to resolve. So I would suggest that in addition to the comments that would have been made, if the county council could summarize the hearing, and I don't know what the process is, but there have been a series of questions raised, it seems to me, and that before you move on anything, you need to be able to answer those questions. I have talked to the ODA also, and I didn't explore the liability of herbicides, but that's a very real question, and I think it's a subjective potential argument that needs to be clarified. So my suggestion to you would be, as one who believes the district is not appropriate at this point in time at least, is to prepare a summary of what's been said, try to work with those of us that are interested to see if we can establish the basis for the liabilities that have been mentioned. If in fact, and I think if I've read Chapter 607 sort of correctly, and that's the Livestock District chapter, that there is a period of time of about 5 days under an open or in a district whereby the offended party can go through the process of gathering the cattle. If after you've done all of the work I think will do, and you feel there's a need to move forward, I could see a targeted kind of approach whereby you aim the collection of cattle at the source rather than having a massive district which puts a bunch of people at risk for liabilities that they're not aware of. So I think there's some alternatives, but until you've explored those, it's impossible, in my mind, with clear conscience, to go forward with the action that's before you, and some time needs to be taken to resolve some of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Stupid thing. I'm still trying to get used to this thing. I keep bumping into the microphone. So any other proponents in the room? Okay. How about proponents on the phone?
When you mean component, what are you talking about?
Are you in favor of the livestock district?
Yes, I am in favor of the district.
Okay, state your name and address, please, for the record.
Dave Demaris, 50857 Unifine Road. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I've got land, about 1,400 acres, and we go from Warm Springs over into Van Sickle Canyon and up the other side of Van Sickle a little ways, and we join the 9 Mile Ranch on the other end. And I really think that my family had cattle for 50 years probably, and we always took it as our responsibility to keep them cattle in. And now people don't necessarily take it that way. They don't go out and build the fence and to keep them in. A one-wire electric fence is just not going to hold cattle in that area. There's too much wind and weeds that blow, and the people that next to us that had cattle and they put electric fence. It just don't work, you know. It just don't work. And we had some fires came through and burned our fence all out, and it never really got fixed back right again. So it makes it really hard to keep the cattle out of the CRP ground. So I think if everybody with cattle would take care of the fence, it would be a better deal. And that's about all I got to say, really.
Great, thank you, appreciate it. Anybody else on the phone, proponent?
Yes, could I speak up?
I can hear you.
Okay, it's Tom Peterson. I live out off of Juniper Canyon, 84423 Wallula Road. And I for an enterprising young guy, it's a good place to run cattle. You can, if you are familiar with this ground, you probably can farm 85% of it. You've got steep hillsides, deep canyons. You can't farm, and it makes a good opportunity to run a few head of cattle. Well, which I do, but then I try to maintain fences, but the problem is, it's the Cold Springs elk that want to come through. They don't want to jump fences. They like to run through. So I don't know when the cows are out in the neighbor's wheat or not. I can't check every day if you're out spraying on the tractor and stuff. So that's another problem to consider. And I agree with Larry Williams. I think we need a little more time to study this and see what can be done. And then, like Mike said, I like the idea of postponing this and see what the summary comes out to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Anybody else on the phone that's a proponent? Okay, hearing none.
I have a comment to make or a question to ask.
Okay, go ahead. Please identify yourself for the record.
My name is Carrie Luke, and I live at 1356 Southwest 37th Street. So my question is about my letter that I wrote in the other day, and I want to know why anything hasn't been done on that situation.
Real quick, let me stop you right there. Is this, I don't think this is pertaining to the Livestock Hearing District. Is that part of this hearing?
No, it isn't.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop you right there. This is a public hearing for the Livestock District.
Okay, so when can I come to an open format to speak?
That was the first part of the meeting when we called for public comment. That was not part of the agenda.
Okay, when's the next one?
The next one is August 5th? August 5th.
Okay, I will be there.
Thank you. Okay, back to the room for opponents of the district.
Can I make one more comment?
Yeah.
Jim Williams again. I want to talk about fence in Pacific and liabilities to fence. I think it's very important. If a cattleman puts a good fence up.
We're only stopping for 2 seconds. If you're not speaking, could you please mute your mics? We're getting a lot of feedback on there. Thank you. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Again on fence, if a cattleman has a good fence up in wheat country, and if there is a wheat fire, I think that every wheat producer should be insured properly if he causes that fire to be responsible for that fence. And I've had that particular type of insurance since I've farmed. And if you have an implement and you're farming next to a fence and you hit a fence, I think that the wheat grower should be responsible for that fence. I think a call should be made to that cattle producer and say, hey, my guy hit your fence, or I hit it. I think you should step up and fix it. And you should make that call to that cattle producer and let them know that you hit their fence. That's being responsible. So on our end of it, I think we most definitely have responsibilities as well. You know, if you're going to be a wheat grower, you should have the proper insurance. That fence is next to you. It's not that cattle producer's fault if that fence burns. Be responsible. And I think really today, I think both sides are looking to solve liability issues, and everybody's trying to be responsible. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any opponents to the petition in the room?
Yes, sir. Probably more than me. I'll take this occasion. My name's Terry Simpson, 40895 Despain Gulch Road. I'm happy to speak in opposition, partly due to the magnitude of this district they formed. Where I live on Despain Gulch Road, when I was a boy growing up, it was a gravel road from Stanfield to Highway 395. Now, over the years, it's been paved. It's now used as a back road from Hermiston to Pendleton, and a lot of times the people using it have a specific reason on a Saturday evening or whatever. In the first place, I think this is mostly a problem of being neighborly. No one, I have no concept that this is open range. But that fact that it has been designated open range gives me some freedom from liability. Several things I'd just like to clarify. You can keep cattle in with an electric fence. It all determined if the cattle have adequate feed and they have no reason to leave. We have in Despain Gulch, not just myself, but other landowners, about 2,000 acres of expired CRP that we have not chosen to start farming again. Most of these wheat farmers will tell you the market doesn't demand that we need a lot more wheat. So anyway, we've decided to run some cattle. We have a young man out there now. It all depends on the operator. We have an operator that had 850 head of yearlings up and down the canyon. There's been no problem with them. They're grazed in the spring. Most of them will leave, before they're out of feed. If they're adequately on adequate feed, they're not that hard to contain. So my concern is these people have a problem in North County, and I understand the problem. I've grown wheat and I've had cattle. If the cattle are out of feed and there's wheat over there, they're going to go over there. I would question sometimes if they can actually prove to me that there was that much damage on the wheat. Depends on when the cattle go in and when the cattle come out. There's a lot of areas in this country where they graze wheat for a period of time, then take the cattle out, and it's a beneficial process. So a lot of what this is neighbors are having trouble with neighbors. Those kind of things in the old days, I think they solved them. You solved them between the neighbors. Well, because they've had this problem and it's rubbed a sore spot on them for a long time, they've decided to throw us all under the bus and include us all in their district. So anyway, if you look at Despain Gulch, you'll see that's a long ways from where these people are having trouble. And I understand what they're trying to do, and actually it would make me unhappy too if I had a neighbor that I could not get to do their job to keep their livestock in. Most people try. But I am concerned about that highway going through there. The stories about the motorcycles and the cars, we all know that 55 miles an hour on these secondary roads in these counties is the law. Well, this road down to Despain Gulch in this day and age is used to transport grain, but the primary thing is the people that use it traveling back and forth across this end of the county. They don't necessarily go 55. They go between 55 and 105, depending on where they're going and what they're doing. And the liability changes with this law, as they've all stated. And so I guess I'm in favor of a little more input from everybody to see. And I know you can have a homeowner's policy, but if somebody hits a horse on the road, these trial lawyers aren't living in big houses because they take the easy route. They're going to look at the big house up on the hill and say, well, let's start out asking for several $1 million, and if you think your homeowner's policy is going to cover that, I think you better check with them, because your umbrella is probably going to have to cover your net worth. And so, I get this letter in the mail from the county, and a lot of work the county had to do, and the county commissioners to send out all these letters. So I understand the process, but I guess I just have those concerns that I didn't really want to be included in their district. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. Anybody else in opposition? Yeah, come on up.
Hi there, I'm Ann Livingston. I live in Pendleton, Oregon, but I have property that's affected out Holdman Route. I concur with everybody's reasoning who've already spoken in opposition, but I also morally concur with the people who are proponents, because the frustration that they're experiencing, I would feel the same way. I prepared something so I don't forget my thoughts, but the basis of my message is that I think we need, rather than jumping to this district, we need to take more time to work together as neighbors. Like Terry just said, a lot of this stuff was resolved in, years past across the kitchen table or in the shop, and it's not always comfortable, but talking it out was a better way to do it, rather than, like Terry said, throwing everybody under the bus, because remedies can't be come to currently. So I'm going to go ahead and read this and then and see how it goes. I am in opposition to the North Country County Livestock District. Open range designation is one of the few risk management tools agricultural property owners have available to them. Without it, you're imposing an unfair limitation on their ability to successfully operate and retain their property as an investment for future generations. It's been offered that an insurance policy will be sufficient to protect a property owner in place of an open range designation. This is not true. In today's extremely litigious society, a liability policy is not enough to ensure that level of confidence and comfort. In many documented cases, an insurance policy can't prevent a property owner from potentially losing everything they have. An aggressive attorney who knows the assets of the property owner, whether that property owner is the direct defendant or is the landlord of the defendant, will target the highest award they can garner, and often without regard to the policy limit. The property owner will have to utilize every resource in defense if they are sued. The open range designation is one of those resources a property owner's attorney will need to have available to them in order to protect their client and their client's livelihood. My reference earlier identifies the unilateral importance of the open range designation to all North County property owners. Even those property owners who have no intention of ever running livestock could be impacted should they find necessity to someday rent their property to someone who does run livestock. Property is an investment and an asset that most intend to keep in their family and hand down to future generations. It's absolutely a consideration for those future generations that those future generations will need every resource available to them to ensure that that property is free of encumbrances to their potential earnings opportunities. Designation as a livestock district is an encumbrance that I cannot find historical evidence of ever being removed once it's created. Consider this scenario. Imagine yourself as one of these property owners. You don't ever intend to run livestock, but you have family who doesn't live on the farm. They live and work in town. In order to encourage your young grandchildren to embrace the country experience, you offer to keep a 4-H or an FFA project at the farm. Imagine a 4-H steer or a pony rubbing a gate open in the night, getting into the road, and a family traveling by in their car collides with it. The driver happens to be the father of the family, and that father dies. What's the value of that man's life? What is his lifetime earning potential? Those are the questions an attorney's going to consider. What's the impact on that family? I can guarantee that their attorney will have an estimate and will fight with everything they have to award their client. Hopefully you've remembered to purchase a livestock coverage policy. I'm certain that the limits of an insurance policy are not ever going to be sufficient to protect you, a hardworking, well-meaning farmer from a motivated, well-informed, and opportunistic attorney. Owning property provides property owners the opportunity to always have the free will to utilize their property in a way that will maximize their ability to create income and support their family. No one knows what the future holds, and it's especially unclear for those in agriculture. If those opportunities are lessened because of the additional cost of expensive umbrella policies necessary because of the lost open range designation, then you've added yet another reason that more and more agriculturalists are going to be unable to remain viable. If this argument hasn't impacted your decision, please consider the following. And I tentatively put this out there. I would like to propose that if the designation is the absolute only option for some of the property owners in the far north portion of the proposed footprint. Please remove the property adjacent to Holden Highway and Highway 37 and all properties south of that area from the Livestock District. I propose this because these areas south of Holden Highway and 37 have experienced increasing traffic in the past years. Trucks, cars, avoiding the interstate know that these roadways are another route to the north and have begun traveling these roads to the detriment of local families in the area. The roads aren't appropriately designed for increased traffic, and the opportunity for increased accidents is creating much more of a liability for property owners. Additionally, these roads need to have signage installed that inform the travelers of the open range designation. Retaining the open range designation as part of the proposed in this part of the proposed area will allow those property owners who are already dealing with increased traffic to have some ability to defend themselves. Open range is one of the last tools of risk management agricultural property owners have available to them. In our world, the designation is often not even enough. Why would you take away something that could save them from losing their ability to protect themselves? So that's my statement. I again want to circle back. I'm one of the bad actors in this picture. I am one of the reasons that so many people have gotten mad, but I'm gonna give you the backstory on that. I've owned this property for 3 years and we had a plan. It was never to back up to the fence or back up to the property and turn those cattle loose. It would never ever be in my best interest to turn these cows out and hope for the best. The bottom line would never make sense. We got an unimproved piece of property that had come out of CRP. We got those cattle on. We hauled water the first year. The second year we invest in developing the water, and the third year was going to be the year we put fence up. And we had a situation that came that we couldn't have prepared for. And we acquired a little bit of neighboring property to keep those cattle taken care of, but they had to be off of that property by the end of February, and that's when the problem came. I feel awful. I feel awful. I don't want our cattle on the neighbor's property. I know how hard farmers work. Every individual in this room, they're my friends. And so why would I ever impose upon them knowingly and with malice? That is never my intent. So I can only speak from my situation, apologizing all over the place, but please don't make all of these other property owners pay to the detriment of losing this designation. It's never going to be a good idea. So, any questions? Please let me know.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Any others in opposition in the room? Okay. Seeing that, I'm going to go back to the phones. Anybody on the phone want to speak in opposition?
To unmute yourself, press the star key twice. Mute off.
Isn't technology nice? Anybody on the phone want to speak in opposition? Okay. Hearing none, go back to my colleagues on the phone. Do either one of the commissioners want to address the room or the phone?
Let me go out of hearing.
Okay. And yeah, one last thing, sure. Yeah, come on up.
Jeff Knutson again from Helix. I mean, we can go around about the liability issues, and I think those are good questions to be asked and answered in the future. One thing I think needs to probably be looked at is case law, especially for the state of Oregon. A lot of times when you read those case studies, you will see the word negligence in the case study. Was that rancher negligent? And that's, you know, we've got a lot of ranchers in the room here that aren't negligent. I mean, they're out there building fence. Mike Thorne being one of them. He's building fence like crazy out there. Is he negligent? No. I mean, that goes in front of a judge. Is he out there busting his behind getting that fence built and doing everything, yes, he's doing everything he can to keep those cattle out. Are the cattle going to get out? There's nobody in this room, I think, would agree. I think everybody would agree that there's no fence in the world that's going to keep all the cattle in. So I think looking at not just the liability issues through insurance companies, but also maybe looking at some case law, informing yourself on that, looking specifically up the word negligence. I think you'll learn a lot about what actually a livestock district is and the liability issues that are taken away from the wheat producer, but also there's some coverage there for the cattlemen too. They're a little bit at risk because none of those roads out there, as been said before, none of those roads are listed as an open range, which specifically is required if it's an open range. But the county hasn't done anything about that, maybe up in Ukiah a little bit. So they're a little bit at risk there. I think there's some good questions to be answered over the next 6 weeks, and but the insurance liability is a good question, but also the negligent question needs to be asked. On my part, are cattle checked every day? I think for a cattleman, I think the cattle need to be checked every day. I checked them every day. I had a gal that did that for an hour and a half every day checking cattle. I don't have any cattle, but I was checking them to make sure they were out of the wheat and they were in the proper areas they need to be in. But I would say that somebody that is not negligent is checking the cattle every day, feeding them, watering them. Like was said earlier, a single wire fence that's hot can keep the cattle in if they're fed and watered. So anyway, I just wanted my last 2 cents that I wanted to put in. Just when you guys start doing your research on this, I think some of that needs to be addressed and looked at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Doug, the next one on here is ORS Provisions. Do we need to go into that, or is that okay? And staff report, but you've already given that. Okay. So at this time, do we come back out of public hearing?
It depends on what the board really wants to do. If you want to continue the hearing, it's best. If you want to continue the matter, I'd continue the hearing rather than closing it.
So if we're going to continue the hearing, because I'm sure the other two didn't hear that.
Basically, if you want to keep the record open to allow for future testimony, you continue the hearing at this point rather than closing it.
Okay. Bill, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that the continuation is a good idea. I think we need to do that. Give the parties an opportunity to discuss options and to find other information. I did want to make a comment that insurance liability limits are always a concern. After a 45-year career in the insurance business, I can tell you that you need to be properly covered, and everyone needs to have basic liability and an umbrella policy. The matter of having your cattle get out and your liability for that is not much different from pulling from a stop sign and blasting someone who was driving by because you didn't see them. Your liability is still there, and it's immense, so you need to pay particular attention to that. But I would be in favor of a continuation of this hearing for a month's period of time and would so move.
Commissioner Murdoch.
I'm reluctant to second because I would prefer that we establish the date of September 2nd. If the maker of the motion concurs with the September 2nd date and keeping the hearing open, I'm fine with the second.
I agree with that friendly motion.
Okay.
Okay, so is that a second? Can we vote on that?
Yes.
For this?
Yeah.
I'm checking with council. Hang on just a second.
I'm still thinking about my colleague's admonition, you can't buy too much insurance.
Yeah, you can go ahead and continue.
Okay, as a true veteran of the insurance.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, side comment.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second on to continue the hearing until September 2nd. Any further discussion on that?
You might state the time, too.
Oh, and the time would be at the 9 o'clock Board of Commissioners meeting. And so any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of continuing the hearing, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries to continue the hearing to September 2nd. I want to thank everybody for their testimony. I've written down a lot of questions, a lot more writing than I had anticipated, so thank you everybody on the phone as well and in person. You're more than welcome to stay and listen to the tantalizing rest of our agenda, but if you want to sneak out the back door, I wouldn't blame you. Okay, number 2 on the agenda is Development Code Amendment. And again, we're going to go, well, actually, I guess we still need to come out of public hearing.
Well, you went open.
Okay, so we're still in public hearing mode. And that's this one, right?
That's
okay.
And I'll run and get
Bob. Okay.
I'm on the phone, Doug.
Oh, Doug, he's on the phone. I think he was watching to make sure, see how far you could get to the door before he stopped you. Okay. So this is a new business, text amendment 220-082, an adoption to revisions to Umatilla County Development Code. The proposed revisions relating to relaxing certain setback standards and landscape design standards for properties zoned retail service, commercial, and light industrial along the Highway 395 North Corridor in unincorporated Umatilla County. Amendment procedures included in UCDC sections 152.750 through 152.753. Bob, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Bob Walder, County Planning Director. Commissioners, the item before you is an amendment to the Umatilla County Development Code, which would impact the Highway 395 North Corridor, the unincorporated parts of the county between Hermiston and Umatilla, specifically the light industrial and retail service commercial zones that front the Highway 395 corridor. If you recall, back in November of last year, the county approved some changes to the development code, which were to improve the aesthetic character and the economic vitality of the corridor. Well, since then, we've actually been able to implement some of those code changes. And back in February, we met with a prospective developer for an automobile dealership who was having some difficulty meeting some of the new design standards. Primarily, those design standards that they were having difficulty meeting included the 30-foot maximum setback requirement from front lot lines, as well as the landscaping standards. So I called a meeting with the Highway 395 North Technical Advisory Committee and that prospective developer, and we discussed some of those challenges and ways that we could possibly amend the code that would fit or be more favorable to dealerships being able to display their vehicles and their new car inventory on an open air lot. So we arrived at the code changes involving eliminating the 30-foot maximum setback requirement from front lot lines for automobile dealerships, as well as the 15% landscape coverage requirement. While the landscape requirements seemed well intended, they work well for a smaller lot that's maybe like a 1 acre size parcel. However, when you get to a larger size parcel, like 10 acres, like this developer is looking at, you would have to have over 1.5 acres of landscaping, which isn't exactly conducive to saving water in our critical groundwater areas. Also, the state of Oregon has a limitation of a half acre of irrigated landscaping per parcel, and so we determined that it would be best if we adjusted that requirement, keep the 15% requirement for landscaping, but limit it or cap it at a half acre. So the Planning Commission reviewed these proposed text changes at a public hearing last month, June 25th, and recommended approval by the Board of Commissioners. The Planning Commission also recommended that planning staff explore relaxation of the setback standards for agricultural equipment sales, recognizing that the west part of the county plays a significant role in agriculture, and there are a lot of those types of agricultural-related businesses located along the corridor. After we did some more research and review, planning staff determined that agriculture equipment sales would actually fall under other uses similar to the list of uses allowed in the light industrial and retail service commercial zones. So we determined that we could keep, or basically the agriculture equipment sales would be included in the relaxed standards. So the recommendation of the TAC, Planning Staff, and Planning Commission have been incorporated into this text amendment, which is included as an attachment for your review. Also, there's a couple maps that show the area that we would be looking at. Again, this would only affect the parcels with frontage along the Highway 395 corridor. And our hope is that these changes will help encourage more development and redevelopment along the corridor for businesses like automobile dealerships that want to locate out there.
Okay, is that it?
That's it. Are there any questions for staff?
Bob, I have a question on the setback requirements of changing to 30 feet, that it doesn't work well for this particular kind of business.
Yeah,
is this an exception, or does it apply to every business that would be out there? I mean, would there be cases where we want that 30 feet?
Yeah, so this would only apply to if you look at the text of the proposed change, it only applies to automobile, truck, or motorcycle sales lots. It says they are exempt from the maximum setback requirements when the front lot line is used for automobile, truck, or motorcycle merchandise display. When we went through this process with the committee and the consultant, one of the objectives of the project was to help slow down traffic along Highway 395, which means typically bringing the building closer to the front lot line. That can have a calming effect for traffic. However, with the nature of an automobile business, it's not their goal is to be able to display their merchandise. And so we met with the technical advisory committee and agreed that that would be pretty limiting to what they're able to do if they have to meet that 30-foot maximum setback.
Yeah, I just missed the specification to equipment and automobile dealers.
Yep, so it would still apply for other types of uses out there. We're really trying to limit, huge parking lots out in front of businesses. If we can sometimes locate them to the side or the rear of the business, that can have a better aesthetic effect as well as improves, walkability and things like that.
Okay.
I assume your logic was that there would be a calming effect by an orderly line of vehicles on display.
Well, we're still requiring some landscaping to be in the front lot line. So, the developer submitted a preliminary plan that showed, trees and landscaping along the front, but their vehicles would still be pretty prominent on display there, which we want. Our goal of this whole project's been all along to encourage development and redevelopment of that corridor, and so the committee felt strongly that anything we can do to help encourage that is a positive.
Yeah, I read your document. I'm happy.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions of staff? Okay. Is the applicant on the phone? Okay. How about anybody want to speak in favor of the application on the phone? Okay. Hearing none. Anybody on the phone want to speak in opposition? Anybody who has any questions or concerns? Okay. Hearing none, can we go out of hearing mode now? Okay. We'll go out of public hearing mode. Back into regular meeting.
I move for approval.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Item number 3, Hermiston Chamber of Commerce contract.
This is coming before the board for approval of a renewal of a contract with the Greater Hermiston Chamber of Commerce to provide tourism assistance for the county. This contract has been in place for a number of years, but was allowed to expire, and it is now before the board for further review. The dollar amount remains the same as that has been within the last year. I believe it's $2,200 a month, plus approved costs.
Remind me of the duration.
This is for the fiscal year, so it would end in June 30th, 2021. It's actually $2,400 a month, sorry. Thank you.
Doug, I think I sent you a question about the termination provisions on page 4. My question was, I know paragraph A says it's pretty much an at-will contract, could be canceled by either party in 30 days. Is paragraph B then necessary?
We always want to have the term on it. Paragraph B. Is that paragraph B is in the termination portion?
Yes.
Did you want this?
I think it's almost there.
Right there.
Yes, because if the funding is not there, we can immediately terminate rather than having to wait the 30 days under A. So that's the reason B is there. It's for immediate termination.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And nay, I'm opposed. Okay, motion carries. Item number 4, the Hutchinson case.
Okay, the county, along with all the other counties in Oregon, is the defendant in a class action lawsuit brought by some taxpayers that are alleging that the current tax foreclosed property method that's established by the Oregon state statutes is unconstitutional. The plan by the county is to jointly respond to the lawsuit and hire one counsel to represent all the counties. And so what's before the board is to authorize the county to join in the joint representation and agree for payment of the expenses. The plan for the payment of the expenses is to have an equal amount up to $10,000 per county, and then if it's more than that for the county, then it would be based on population. And I think Umatilla County would fall within the proposed 2% of the costs.
What's the progress of the case so far?
It has been filed. There has not been any response, any responses made. Most of the count, let's see, Umatilla County was just served on this last week.
That's in circuit court now? Or has it been filed there?
Yes, yeah, it is a state case. It's not a federal case.
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Commissioner reports. Commissioner Elfring.
Not a great deal new to report. I attended the Fair Board meeting last night. The fair is proceeding with the livestock sale, both in person and an online sale. It's going to be very regulated and stay within the confines of the governor's restrictions. I'd encourage everyone to stay tuned to KUMA tomorrow morning, and you'll hear more about the livestock sale. That's all I've got.
All righty. Commissioner Murdoch.
Just a COVID update. We had 22 cases yesterday. We have 34 today. However, the 34 is not actually an accurate representation because we had 2 new reporting agencies that came online today, and some of their cases represent backlog. So my guess is that our numbers are pretty well the same today as they were yesterday in terms of cases. Because of the backlog of reporting, we don't know exactly when they occurred, but they have indicated that we peaked on June 25th, and we're now 2.5 weeks into that. I am sincerely hopeful that that will continue to be the case. We're doing everything we can in terms of outreach. I might report that we have a big campaign forthcoming that the county is sponsoring relative to the importance of wearing masks. But I think also, even though our cases are going down, we need to explore the idea of doing what we can to make testing more readily available to people, particularly for those who might have some difficulty affording it. And so I think that needs to be an initiative of the county to pursue that.
Was that in what you're talking about in that email you sent to me?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Anything further? Okay. All right. I have nothing either at this time. So on that note, we are adjourned. Thank you.